Hi there, my name is Matt Hanlon. I'm a longtime software developer who's worked on a number of platforms and in a variety of environments. macOS is an operating system based on Unix under the hood, so we can do all sorts of things you might associate with power user platforms. By default, macOS comes with an app called Terminal, which you can find in the applications/utilities folder. That's going to give you access to all of that Unixy goodness under the hood. And if you're familiar with the command line, a lot of this might be a review for you, but I'm going to show you a few different tools that we can use on the Mac, including the built-in terminal and some other third-party apps that we can download to help us get our work done. So we're going to take a look at Terminal first. Like I said, it's found in the Applications Utilities folder. In the Finder, you can get to that by holding Command-Shift-U down, or my personal favorite, we're going to use Spotlight, so Command-Space, and just start typing in Terminal. And this is what it looks like. This is not what it looks like out of the box. I've made a few modifications, and there are a few things I do anytime I get to a new machine when I want to work with Terminal. First thing I do is I go to Settings, and I go straight to Profiles. Profiles are what's going to manage what our windows look like. They give us different options, different colors for the background, text color, highlighting colors, and everything. We can also specify things like the font size, the columns and rows in a particular window. And we can also specify the default shell that's going to open up when we create a new terminal window. So I can go and say, I want the Homebrew style to be my default profile, but I'm going to leave it as what I set it here. The most important setting for me is in the shell tab here. And by default, out of the box, this is don't close window. So when I finish working with the commands that I'm working with in that particular terminal window, I will hit Control D and that window will just stay there. I won't be able to enter in any more text or anything, but the window will still stay there on the screen. I don't want that behavior. When I'm done with the terminal window, I just want it to disappear. So I always go and set it to close if the shell exited cleanly. So I set that for most of the profiles. So no matter which one I pick, that's going to be the behavior. So if I'm done with this window here, I hit Control D, that terminal window is going to disappear. There's some other settings you can tweak, keyboard settings, how the tab behaves, and you can set that based on the look and feel of any one of these. You can create your own profiles as well to satisfy your own color palette. In general, this is where we can do things like set the default shell. By default, with macOS, it's Z shell or Z shell if you like. We could go and change that. I personally like Z shell, so I'm going to keep that. But if you did want to set it to bash, there's a really easy way to figure out where bash is by just doing the normal Unix command, which bash, and that'll show you this is the path to it. And you would just paste that into this command text field here. You can also do things like choose what profile opens by default when you hit that Command N button in the terminal, or if it opens up an entire window group. What I like to do is I'll set up a few different windows, usually different colors. I might have Git operations running in one window, Docker containers running from another, scripts running in another, and I keep them color coded so that I know on site which is happening where. Another nice thing about Terminal is I can use Command 1 and Command 2 to get to the different windows. I don't have a Command 3, but if I create new windows, they'll get added in and I can see the keyboard shortcuts that will jump me to those windows here. Now you'll see that the new windows I created are with that green profile. I can change that by doing Command I to bring up the inspector, and I can select a new profile. This way I'm not tied to just having the default one come up all the time. And like I said, I like to use this to differentiate the different windows and the different tasks I have running. So now if this were the state that I wanted to save, that I might use in certain occasions, I would just go up to Window, Save Windows as Group. We're going to call this Jobs window. I have the option to restore all commands when I launch this again. So if I am maybe running a test web service on my own machine, that might be something that I want to have start up all the time. But I can save this and then I can go back and open that from the window menu. You see I have quite a few here. And if I open up the work window group, it'll bring back up that one that launched initially in addition to the other ones that I've opened up. Now we'll close a few of these by just terminating that process. Now you'll note that this one doesn't have this Pro profile, doesn't close when the shell exits cleanly. And you can see how I don't want that kind of thing hanging around. Now, the reason why I leave Z Shell as it is it has some nice features. Some of them are not enabled by default. In fact, I had to add them to my own initializer file. So if I have a look, just like any other Unix system you're familiar with, I have this Z shrc file. It's got a prompt definition, so it'll be a little bit different than the default prompt that might show up. And I've also got this set opt auto CD. Z Shell had this really nice feature of if I type in a command that's not a command, I don't have a binary called pictures anywhere in my path, but I do have a directory called pictures, it'll actually change directories for me. So it avoids me typing cd space pictures. And it's one of those things that's not turned on by default. You can also unset these options if they are set by just saying unset opt auto CD. Now, if you're curious about the options available to you with Z Shell, there's a really good documentation page on zshell.sourceforge.io that I highly recommend checking out. There's lots of different things you can take advantage of in either your scripts or in your daily use getting around terminal. So let's talk about the command line itself. You've got all the comforts of home. If this is your home on other platforms, you can use the arrow keys. I'm using the up arrow key to get through a bunch of commands that I've run earlier. Down arrow key to go back down through that list. That's the history of all the commands that I've used. I can type in history to see the last so many commands I've run. And I can also use familiar tools like the double bang to run the last command that I just typed in. I can also use that exclamation mark plus the prefix of a command that I run earlier, like nethack. Some of the other behaviors we have are things like being able to jump around the line. So if I'm typing here for a new file and I realize I want to edit this file with Vim, I can use Control A to get to the beginning of the line, type in Vim, and if I need to keep adding things at the end, maybe this is actually going to be a JSON file, I use Control E to jump to the end of the line. You can learn all about how to get around the terminal by going to some excellent support pages that Apple have provided. There's a whole user guide for whichever version of macOS you're working with, a pretty comprehensive table of contents, and a whole suite of keyboard shortcuts that you can take advantage of when you're working with the Terminal app. Now, the nice thing about Terminal is it has some really nice integrations with macOS and the Finder in particular. So I can go and click on a folder like this. If I know that I need to change directories into there to push or pull from GitHub, I can just click and drag into a terminal window, and it's going to add the fully qualified path, including escaping any spaces that might be in the names, so that now I'll find myself inside the new project and I can get to work. Now, there's some nice tools on the Mac that you might not see on other platforms. So I'm going to change directories into my pictures folder, and I'm going to use the open command to open up that folder in the Finder. So there's my pictures folder. I'm going to highlight this rotate.jpg file. It's a landscape. I'm going to rotate this file. This might be something that we have to do so many times, especially if we're working on a web service or something like that. I'm going to use the sips command and the R flag to rotate that file 90 degrees. So when I hit that command, we can see already in the background that it's changed the rotation of that image. And there are a ton more options. This is a really powerful image processing tool that I use all the time for processing images in a whole directory. In fact, this is a really good example. This is a directory full of images. I might want to resize them all, or I might want to convert them to a different format. The open command that I just used to open something up in the Finder also takes an A flag, so I can specify which app I want to have open a particular file. In this case, I'm telling it to open the rotate.jpg file with the preview app, and you can see it rotate in the preview, and when I go back to the preview app, it's also updated there as well. So we've rotated all the way back around again. So those are a couple of handy tools. We also have a way to access the pasteboard on macOS with a couple of tools called PB Copy and PB Paste. I'm going to start working with Heart of Darkness. Imagine we're editing a new version of that book, so I'm going to cat that version. It's the text version, and it's just a lot of text. And I need to drop that into something like Pages or maybe even the Notes application. Well, what I can do is I can cat that file and then pipe the output into PB Copy. And now if I go to the Notes application, I can create a new note, and I'm able to paste that entirety of that document into my Notes application or Pages or any other app on macOS. Now, likewise, maybe I only want to take a selection of this. Maybe I really like this paragraph here. So I'm going to go do Command C to copy that to my pasteboard. And I can pipe that into a file as well using the PB Paste command. And we're going to write that to file.txt. So if I now that file, we can see that I've got a new file there called file.txt, and it's got just that paragraph that I copied from the note. So that's a handy way to pass data between the command line and your regular applications on macOS. Defaults is another tool that we have on macOS that will read and write preferences. So if I go to, for example, com.apple.textedit, I'll get prompted by macOS because it is a security feature. I am accessing data outside of my own little sandbox, so I'll allow that. And I can see that I've got a list of key value pairs. Now for TextEdit, I haven't got very many preferences saved, but it does say things like what was the last directory I used in the open panel, how large was the last window that I had open, where was the font panel. So if you find preferences that maybe you can't access through the regular means for certain apps, or even your own app if you're writing your own, this defaults command will allow you to read and write those preferences. Now, for those of you who maybe use JSON files quite a lot for either web services or mocking up web services, there's a really handy utility called plutil. It's designed for writing and reading property lists, which are kind of the lifeblood of macOS apps. In most apps, inside the app package, you'll find a file called info.plist, and there are a few different formats over the years. There's the old school style that looks a lot like a JSON file. There are the newer ones that are in XML, or even better, the binary ones that save a lot of space. plutil will let you convert between those different formats and also create property lists yourself. I might use it if I were going to create a web service or a mocked up web service on my own. So I would use the create flag. I would create an XML1, and we'll just call it test1.xml. If I read that file, I can see it's just an empty property list. It's got a dictionary, and I can use plutil to insert keys. So I'm going to insert a key called payload. It's going to be of type string, and it's just going to be a simple response in my mocked up web service, and the response is going to be OK, and we're going to append it, and I need to tell it what file we're going to use. So now if I cat that file, I can see the dictionary is not empty anymore. It's got this key, payload, and a string. It's just OK. And now if I want to use this as part of the basis of some kind of mocked up web server I'm using, I can then use plutil to convert it. to JSON and just tell it the file and give it the resulting file I want to export it to. So now if I cat this new file that I've just created, so you can see the resulting JSON, this looks a lot like something we might use if we're developing an API. So PL-util could be a really handy way to write some scripts for you to generate some fake web responses for the work you're doing. We have other ways of interacting with the whole system from the command line by using a command like say. We can have it say something simple like,
"Hello world."
There are different voices we can use, and it's a really handy, flexible tool. And there is also a command line screen capture tool. And lots of options. So if you're building out a testing platform and you want to see how the system is behaving when a user goes through a certain set of events, maybe the screen capture command is something that you're going to use in that script to capture the output on a device that's maybe running unmanned. There's lots of good stuff there on macOS that you might not have seen on other platforms. Now, how do you get more tools onto the system? If you're familiar with platforms like Linux, you might be asking, well, where's my version of app? Where's my package manager that's going to let me download the tools I need to get my job done? Well, on the Mac, we have a tool called Brew or Homebrew. If you go to brew.sh, that's going to give you this command here. You can just copy it and paste it into terminal, and that's going to install the Brew package manager. On this site, you can search for all the different packages you might want to take advantage of, including your favorite if you are coming from Linux. With Brew, we can install all sorts of developer tools, programming languages, web services, and loads more. For example, I can install Apache Top. We're running a web service locally. And now I can check out the running processes on my Apache web server. I could also run things like htop, which I've installed via Brew. Just a more colorful version of top, the command that you might be familiar with in Unix or Linux. It lets you get an insight into the activity on your machine. With Brew, you can also install regular applications. In fact, I've got an alternative to terminal called iterm, and you can install that by using the cask flag. Now, I already have that installed, but you might even install things like Firefox. And if you do want to install iterm, you can install it using brew install --cask iterm2. And in this case, I've already got Firefox installed, so it just tells me that there's already an existing application there. So Brew is the way to go if you want to install all sorts of tools you're going to take advantage of from the command line. I highly recommend checking it out and having a search for the packages on brew.sh or using the command line tool itself. If you're a hardcore, die-hard terminal user and this terminal app isn't quite cutting it for you, there are other ways of accessing the terminal. In fact, iterm is a really good option to use. Like terminal, there are lots of customization options. If we go up to settings, we can change the appearance, we can change AI features, and lots more. We can handle arrangements. We can also do things like split the panes so that we're just working in one window rather than many, so we keep things a little bit tidier. But otherwise, it's exactly the same as using terminal. We're still accessing Z shell by default, and a lot of people swear by iterm just because it allows them, again, to keep their fingers on the keyboard without really having to leave. And there are a lot of shortcuts built in that let you navigate through all of these different panes with just a few more options than the built-in terminal app. In addition to iterm, you can also use an X11 windowing system with macOS. Now, I installed mine using Brew. You would just type brew install xquartz. And as you can see here, I have the latest version installed already. So I can go to the Finder and do Command-Shift-U. And there I'll find Xquartz. When I launch that, we'll see that we have yet another terminal. And in fact, I can install X11 applications like Xeyes, for example. If you've ever used Linux or Unix, you might be familiar with this application. So if you're doing X11 development or you just really miss it from your own old environment, we have it on the Mac. Now for this next piece, if you're an Emacs user, you might want to look away. On most Unix systems, you'll have a tool called Vim or VI. I like to use it because I know that it's available just about everywhere. To use it, you just type in Vim, that's the name of the command, and I'm going to open up an existing file, the Heart of Darkness file. First things first, I can't just start typing in the file. Vim has two different modes. It has a reader mode where we can navigate around using the keyboard, and then it has an insert mode. And I'll know that I'm in insert mode when insert shows up down at the bottom of the screen. So I can get around the file by using the arrow keys, or I can use the H, J, K, and L keys. J and K will get me up and down. H and L will take me left and right. That's for jumping around one character at a time or one line at a time. You can also jump by words by using the W key, from going word to word. If you want to jump ahead 8 words, you would hit 8W. You can also search for text using the slash key, and I'm going to type in darkness, and it'll jump to the next place it finds darkness. I can also jump to the end of the file by hitting Shift G, or if I want to jump to a specific line, I can hit, for example, 1, Shift G to jump all the way back up to the top. While I'm in viewer mode, I can also do things like delete. Maybe I don't want this extra line. I've got a big blank space here. I didn't mean for that to happen. I can hit D twice and that'll delete a line. And if I wanted to change that biggest, I'm going to hold down the question mark and type in biggest, and that will search backwards, just like slash search forwards. And if I want to delete a word, I just do DW. So now it just says brooding motionless over the greatest town on earth. I've still yet to enter that insert mode though. And the way I can do that is by pressing the I key. And I will let me start typing wherever my cursor is right now. So right now it's on the G in greatest. So if I wanted to reinsert that biggest, that would let me insert. If I wanted to get around the file with H, J, and K, of course I can't, because those are valid characters that I can enter into the file. So the way to move around the file is either by using the arrow keys or by hitting the escape key to move back into viewer mode. And if I realize actually I didn't want to insert that new text, I can hit the U key to undo the work that I just did. I can also use the A. So if I want to add text just after G, A will advance me to the next character, and then I'll start inserting text there. If I want to insert a new line, I would hit O, and that would drop me down to the next line, ready to type. If I really like this paragraph here and I wanted to repeat it, I can use the Shift Y to yank that text into my pasteboard, and then P to paste it. With those tools, that'll give you a lot of ability to be able to go and edit text, whether it's code that you're working on or a README, all without having to open anything other than terminal. Now, the biggest problem people have with Vim oftentimes is how on earth do I get out of it and how do I save my changes? So to leave this file, if I wanted to leave and I realized actually I don't want to keep my edits, I would do :Q exclamation mark, and that will force quit my editing session without saving my changes. But if I do want to save my changes, I would just add a W for write and Q for quit, and we're done. And now if I take a look at that file again, it's worth learning a little bit more just to make yourself productive. In the next topic, I'm going to go over some safety and security issues, how to work with some of the key measures that macOS has in place to keep you safe, but still get your work done. See you in the next video.